Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing: a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I am mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This episode is number 85, Humility plus Magnificence. Yesterday, we played with an interesting question in which the issue was a person who was frightened off of their magnificence, and it almost read as humility. So the question was, is it really humility, or is it being afraid of magnificence? Or is the humility genuine and the magnificence it was all that was there for that person? Well, what we found out when we explored that was that in reality, the humility, if it was an improper understanding of one's talents, that is actually a failure state, a lost state of humility. Because what humility is all about is the accurate understanding of your giftedness, and an awareness that it's gift, and therefore it's not for you to become all puffed up over, but to have a sense of gratitude for your gifts, and then to honor those gifts by taking the lid off magnificence and being willing to be your very, very best self. Well, tonight we're going to play with it ever so slightly differently, because tonight we wanted to say, well, what if you've got both of those going for you? Yesterday, it turned out that not only were you running away from magnificence, but you didn't really have humility, because humility requires an accurate assessment. So those were both on the lost side. Now let's take a look at, this time around, putting humility and magnificence both in the plus side. What kind of a person has both? What kind of a character, because we're talking fiction here really, what kind of a character has magnificence and humility? I mean, if you're out there being magnificent, what is it? What's that old thing? It's hard to be humble when you're as great as I am. Well, actually, not when you think about it again. Because humility, again, has to do with how you react to your giftedness. You correctly assess your giftedness, you've taken the lid off magnificence, and you've actually become what you're capable of being. Well, then with true humility, you would be grateful for the gift you had, and you would honor it by being all that you're capable of being. And that's when it comes around to, and darn that I cannot name the person who created this quote, but it's just too good not to include it here. Humility does not mean you think less of yourself. Humility means you think of yourself less. So it's all about where your attention is going. Now, I don't want to go too far with that, because we do have other character traits that are exactly about attention. So I'm not going to push that avenue. But it is completely possible, when you think about it then, that you can have magnificence along with humility. And if you think about, what would your character be like? Would he almost be, you would think that he would almost be, it would almost be as though he were unaware of his own contribution to the magnificence that he had created. But I think that, again, would not be quite accurate, because humility requires an accurate assessment of one's gifts. So I think it would simply have to be, if we think about it, it would be being in a grateful state at all times for this magnificence that was generated, but if the magnificence came out of the gifts that were given, then in reality the attribution of the magnificence becomes the important thing, and that is a different character trait called magnanimity. And we won't pull magnanimity into it tonight because that is a separate trait, but magnanimity recognizes that magnificence has to be spread around because credit has to be given where credit is due. Is a big part of magnanimity. So think about those traits, and when you think about other character traits that you think might be in an interesting juxtaposition. For example, we've now looked at humility and magnificence where they were both on the lost side, and this time we looked at humility plus magnificence both on the victory side. Can you have a character where they're at cross purposes? And that's a pretty easy one to come up with if you're going to say somebody who has magnificence and lacks humility. That's pretty easy to imagine because that's just your character giving himself credit for the magnificence that came out of him rather than understanding that it came out of his giftedness. So that one's easy to understand. But what if we switch it the other way? Can we have a person who is very strong in humility and very weak in magnificence? Again, not too hard to consider because it would be a character who does indeed understand his strengths but is still afraid to use them. So yes, of course, those two are even easier to understand than in the cases that we just explored in depth, where the two go together both to the lost side or both to the victory side. Well, that's our content for tonight, but I have some very exciting news when it comes to my book. I've been telling you for a while that my book is coming out soon, and I have a date. On Monday, you will be able to order my book. So if you follow my podcast on Monday, when we come to this page, you will have a URL that you can go to actually order the book. And I'm so excited. You're only going to have to pay for the cost of the shipping and the materials. I don't need any profit from it. I didn't make any profit teaching the 35 lesson course, and I don't need to profiteer off the book either. I want you to have it in your hands. So look for another announcement on Monday. The wait is nearly over. Thank you. And that is it for today. Bye-bye.